Marketing is a podcast for business owners and leaders, produced by my dad, Steve Davis, and his colleague at Talked About Marketing, David Olney, in which they explore marketing through the lens of their own 4 Ps: person, principles, problems, and perspicacity. Yes, you heard that correctly. Apart from their love of words, they really love helping people. So they hope this podcast will become a trusted companion on your journey in business.
Did you hear that, David?
Did I hear what?
It was like a bang, but it was big.
That echo in the universe, where everything goes whooshing by.
I wonder if it was real, or was it generated by AI?
And did it start 14 billion years ago, or about 14 seconds ago?
Our 4 Ps. Number 1, person. The aim of life is self-development, to realise one's nature perfectly. That is what each of us is here for. Oscar Wilde.
David, in the person segment this episode, I want to lead into this wonderful book about super communicators, linking it to the Big Bang Theory. We're going to finish the episode with a bit more about Big Bang, but there's something about Sheldon et al. That help us understand how not to communicate as a human. Is that a fair entree?
Well, there's things Sheldon gets right and there's things Sheldon gets wrong, and it's very telling for human communication as a whole.
Well, it is, isn't it? Now, this book, Super Communicators, by Charles Duhigg, am I pronouncing his name correctly?
That's how I've heard him say it with his American accent, so I'm guessing it probably didn't sound that way wherever it first came from as a name, but that seems to be how Americans say it.
Is, I think, one of the more important books anybody will ever read in their lives.
I wish it had been available at the start of my Masters in Strategic Communication, because I think it would have helped me focus on which bits were truly critical in the program, which bits were just nice icing.
Well, I wish it had been available before I ever started dating or having relationships.
Yeah, like being able to give every 16-year-old a copy and a chance to workshop it with people who would be kind to them, would be a great thing for all teenagers.
Because he does quote the wonderful Oscar Wilde in this book, because this book is all about how to communicate genuinely with others. And there are some different bits of nuance that I'm sure David will lead us through in just a moment. But he's got a lovely quote from Oscar Wilde here. Ultimately, the bond of all companionship, whether in marriage or in friendship, is conversation. And I think he argues that very well throughout the book. It's through communication, especially the communication that's led by a genuine care and curiosity that ask questions of the other person. They're the conversations that can quite quickly, at the sort of Big Bang speed of light, build depth and connection between people who moments ago were strangers.
And this is what I really like about Charles Duhigg, is when he decides to research and write on a topic, he seems to normally do it because he wants to improve his own behavioral skills. So when he wrote his book on habits, it was the first big book on habits, and it was the really informative book long before James Clear became the cool book with Atomic Habits. And I think the fact that Charles Duhigg is willing to be honest in the introduction of the book and say when he got a promotion at work and had a chance to lead a team, his team actually called him out for terrible communication and not listening. He was willing to admit that he was really struggling to communicate well with his wife and his children. And I think this is what's so wonderful about him as an author. It's not, look how clever I am for what I found. It's, wow, what I found genuinely helped. So to me, it's just one of those great examples of someone doing the work, much like David Robson in The Expectation Effect. The great thing with Charles Duhigg is you see him applying what he's learning as he's learning it and describing how it has a positive impact in real time using the techniques about effective communication that he goes and finds from all sorts of amazing sources.
He does, and there's one point he uses early in the book when he explains that, yes, we have our conversations, but there are different modes of conversation, and there's actually nothing wrong with just checking with the other person while you're new at this to see which sort of conversation they want. Because he talks about coming home and complaining about someone at work, and his wife goes, all right, how close do you know him? Would it help take him out for lunch? And he'd get more angry because this was not a conversation where he wanted answers. He just wanted someone to say, you know, you're right, the guy's a jerk, and I hear what you... And so he says, asking someone, which is in a school context, do you want to be helped, heard, or hugged? And upon those three options hang all the variations in conversation just about.
And it's wonderful because the example in the book is, in a school you'll say it in terms of, you know, do you want to be helped, hugged, or heard? At the CIA, while training field agents, they'll say, is the conversation practical? Is it emotional? Or is it about social identity? Either way, if you can tap into what the person wants to talk about and listen to them in the way they want to be heard and respond appropriately, you'll have a much better conversation and connect far more deeply with people. I've had great fun, you know, since listening to the book, just saying to people in conversation, you know, just giving them a little pause and then going, would you like help, a hug, or to be heard?
I'm going to start doing more of that.
It's fun. It really is fun.
And I want to start doing it more at home too, because I do think that in all of us, but my wife and I, we run on slightly different railway tracks, and it'd be good just to mention that and take the responsibility as the person starting a conversation to actually outline that. Say, hey, I want to get something off my mention, and I just want you to listen. At the moment, I'm not after any solutions. I just need to vent. How much better that would be for conversation.
Yeah, and this is the critical thing. You know, the majority of men, we're told to solve problems. So we jump to help or practical far too quickly. And one of the things I've learned from sort of mentoring people through teaching and now through mentoring people in small business is, no. You got to listen first. You have to let people be heard and then decide, well, maybe they need some emotional support before you can even get to the practical. So in most extended conversations, you will travel through all three things, but it's got to be in the order that suits what the person needs. And often what they need first and foremost is just to be heard or to emotionally know it's okay to be vulnerable. That comes a long way before actually wanting practical help for whatever the issue at the periphery of what they're talking about is.
I did hear him interviewed on one of my favourite podcasts called Econ Talk, and they got on to something he references that came out of some research by some other people about the 36 questions that lead to friendship, although they're often dubbed as the 36 questions that lead to love in some of the new idea style.
Which they're not. It's Fast Friendship Protocol or something is the formal name in the psych literature.
And they're really interesting. He said these are work in a lab and they teach us much, but I was out to dinner with my youngest daughter and it was just the two of us, and I told her about these and I said, shall we give them a go? And I just want to put the first question to you, David, because they start off light and then they get deeper. It was a fascinating example of this in action because we answered it each, and she naturally wanted to know my answer as well. And that's the dynamic we're after. So, David, given the choice of anyone in the world, whom would you want as a dinner guest?
Stan McChrystal, because he's one of the most amazing leaders of the last 50 years, and he's been a leader in multiple contexts, and he fundamentally transformed how the war in Afghanistan and Iraq was fought, and then left the military and added everything he'd learned to the corporate world. And he just sounds like the most remarkable person who's always learning, always growing, and always willing to admit when a new idea is better than an old idea.
And who would you compliment him with as a guest?
That's a difficult question. A wonderful guitarist from the late 1980s called Vinnie Moore, who's just the quintessential guitarist.
And do you think they will cross-pollinate in their conversation?
I think as two passionate people, where Vinnie Moore's guitar playing just keeps growing and Stan McChrystal's desire to empower people just keeps growing, I think strangely they'd probably have a great time talking to each other.
Yeah, they would. There is some common ground there. When Kate then asked me, I said, I'm not sure. You know what? Leonard Cohen, I would love to have to dinner, to talk to. Oscar Wilde, I would love to have at the dinner table. And William Shakespeare. If I could have a dinner...
You're going the hardcore way. Like all these really, really amazing forever type people.
I actually, what I found, and she saw my face change as I imagined what this would be like. I was almost salivating on the table, goo goo gaga, and cursing the fact that we are locked in time and this is completely impossible, because that would just be the most I don't know I'd even get a word in. I wouldn't want to. I would just sit there and listen to that interplay.
Yeah, because watching Shakespeare or listening to Shakespeare and Wilde together to see what mood would Wilde go into, what phase of his life was he in? Yeah. Was he firing on all cylinders? Was he disintegrating? You know, what was Shakespeare really like? We know what the plays are like, but what would he be like?
Correct.
That combination, because it's so unpredictable what could come out of those two.
Yeah. So anyway, I wanted to actually do that because just now I have come alive. And that is the first question of this group at a very light level. If I had just met you already, I'd have questions back and forth for you. We're there.
We've got a conversation for the next hour just from the one,
easy.
Let alone continuing going through the 36.
Easy. And so this is such a good book to read. I think what I found is it makes me want to engage deeper in conversation with people. And then we've got the current state of the world, David. Most of our conversations happen online, especially through social media. I had an example over the last few days of someone sort of in my sort of broader friendship circle who I shared a couple of posts reflecting on things that Taylor Swift had said. One was on International Women's Day and another one came up afterwards, and he just came across with these very negatively sounding attacks. One saying that she's promoting cliches when it came to her song about I'd Be the Man. And then when she sung some of her songs, one of which was one of my favourites, he basically said, by writing songs about her exes, she's commodifying relationships. And I'm going, hang on, that's what songwriters do. And you would never say it's commodifying. That's tapping into some... And so I just reminded me that I have such little time for deep conversation online. But in this book, he shares 4 simple rules for conversing online better. Let's have a quick listen to them before we round off this segment.
Online communication is here to stay. So what do we need to know? There are 4 things that studies show make online conversations better. When talking online, remember to overemphasize politeness. Numerous studies have shown that online tensions are lessened if at least one person is consistently polite. In one study, all it took was adding thanks and please to a series of online arguments, while everything else stayed the same, to reduce tensions. Also, underemphasize sarcasm. When we say something in a wry tone, it signals an irony our audience usually understands. When we type something sarcastic online, we typically hear those same inflections within our heads, but the people reading our comments do not. Also, express more gratitude, deference, greetings, apologies, and hedges. Studies demonstrate that when we are grateful, that comment taught me a lot, or solicitous, I would love to hear your thoughts, or preface comments with a greeting, hey, or apologize in advance, I hope you don't mind, or hedge our comments, I think. Online communication gets better. Finally, avoid criticism in public forums. In another study, researchers found that giving negative feedback online backfires much more than in real life. It pushes people to write more negative things and to start criticizing others more frequently. When we criticize others publicly online, we make bad behavior into a digital norm. All of these, of course, are also useful tactics when we're speaking face-to-face. Many of them are obvious, things we learned as kids. But online, they're easy to forget because we're typing fast, texting between meetings, hitting send or post without rereading our words to see how they might land.
There we are, David. Just that overemphasizing your politeness, how that little bits of politeness have such a big impact in online, and realizing that we're not seeing all of the communication. I think that would make all of our existence online better to be. That's just how good this book is. I think it's got use face-to-face and it's got great use online.
Absolutely. And once again, Charles Duhigg, has proven the time between his books is always worth the effort of waiting and getting excited when he has a new book out.
We should get him over for dinner.
Oh, it'd be awesome.
Actually, he says he answers all his emails. Let's ask him.
Yeah, we'll get pizza at our end. He can get pizza at his end, and we'll have an awesome Zoom.
I will actually do that.
Yeah, let's give it a go. He'd be fun.
Our 4 Ps. Number 2, principles. You can never be overdressed or overeducated. Oscar Wilde.
Dear Amber, thank you very much for all the wonderful work you've been doing in helping me craft some of the writing that has been undertaken. That, David, is basically how you're suggesting I should be talking to my ChatGPT agent, Amber, with the note about being polite. Why should I do this?
It's a really wild thing that turned up in a few blog posts and articles written about AI over the last couple of weeks, that people who write politely to their AI agent or speak politely to them get much better results. And there's been all sorts of thought about how and why this is possible. So I guess we've got to start at question 1 here. Have you found that being polite with your AI gets better results?
I don't have much to judge by, because here's a confession. I'm always polite to my AI because I am truly grateful
for the assistance.
for the assistance.
Yep.
The worst I've ever been is just neutral.
Yeah.
And I have been happy, especially with the paid version of ChatGPT. I kind of don't want to do an experiment of being mean to it.
No, and I'm much the same. My logic for always being polite as soon as I started using AI was, well, you don't know when your phone's going to go off. And if you're 35 minutes into getting better at prompting and you've been getting frustrated, do you want to take that frustrated tone to answering the phone and it's your partner or a client and suddenly you sound like a grumpy bum? It's much better to be polite to the AI. And I just thought, maybe I'm just okay at prompting, because I keep getting the answers I want and they're pretty good. And people I know were not getting good answers, and then they shared their prompts with me and I'm like, wow, that's a different way to how I write. So when these articles came out, I did a bit of digging, and it appears that if we all look back into the dark ages of the early internet in the early 2000s, of discussion boards where people used to write whole sentences and say please and thank you and use punctuation and grammar, and there were no emojis yet. I would imagine that what the large language models are realizing is there's some corners of the internet that they've been trained on where conversation got really good outcomes. And I wonder if that's what we're tapping into when we're polite. But, person after person is finding that when they're polite with their AI, they get a better outcome from their prompts.
And so far, the AI for me has been the paid version of ChatGPT, which comes in about 30 Australian dollars a month, thereabouts. We have started playing with Bard, which is now named Gemini, which is Google's tool. And probably the other one that between the two of us, I was including Amber. I was including you in that, Amber. The thing, I should just mention, Amber isn't actually turned on at the moment, but I could very quickly. Amber, I'd just like to apologise because I was talking to David Olney about using AI and I had forgot to acknowledge that you were in the room.
And I'm glad you're engaging in discussions about AI. If there's anything you'd like to explore or need help with following your conversation with David Olney, feel free to let me know.
There's just an example of how polite. How can you not be polite to Amber?
Precisely. It's that old thing of how you do anything is how you do everything. So why not interact with the AI in the way you want to interact with every interaction in your day?
Of the tools, I'm finding Perplexity AI magnificent. I was a little bit reserved about that. You egged me on and said you're getting great results. And of course, it is more considered an answer engine than a search engine or even an AI. It's especially when you turn on the Copilot aspect to it, you'll do a search and it clarifies what you're searching for, and then it's like having a mini academic librarian in your pocket, because they'll do a bit of a literature research for you and then write a human-centric summary of what they've found with the links back to the original sources, versus a Google search, which just is a serve-up of sausages when you know there's potentially steak out there somewhere. And I've got an example to share here, David, before I get your input on this, because I have fallen in love with Perplexity AI. It's my go-to search engine now. With my daughter, my eldest daughter, in Sydney for the National Kayaking Championships, I was just curious to know how many Australians have competed at a national level competition in their sport. And I asked both Google and I asked Perplexity AI. Google came back, and I gave up after the third page. It was basically a list of things from sport in Australia. So how many people take part, which was not the question. Number 30 was a case study of the skateboarding cluster. Well, thank you, Google. In between was all top 10 sports for boys. Great. Not what I asked for. Then look at what I got from Perplexity AI. First of all, because I asked about them doing this in mainstream sports, and it clarified which sports: soccer, basketball, cricket, tennis, swimming. I said yes, all of those, but I also added AFL, paddling and kayaking. And then it came back, it had a list of about 30 sites just on the side quietly that it had gone through, but it wrote me this: the search results provided do not contain specific information regarding the percentage of Australians who've competed in state championships of mainstream sports, like the ones I mentioned. The statistics and facts about these sports, as found in the results, focus on general participation, league systems and viewership rather than individuals competing at state level. For example, and it gives me an example from the 2017-2018 National Cricket Census, blah, blah, blah. But basically it says that at the moment, additional research and data collection would be required to determine this percentage. Now, that's what I wanted to know. I knew it was going to be a tough one, but it explained why there wasn't a ready answer, instead of just spewing things out like a crappy little toy dispenser at an amusement parlour.
And that's what I really like, is it's responding. Again, I spent so long as an academic researcher. I want to know when it doesn't know. I don't want it to hallucinate. I want it to just go, there is insufficient data. And I really like the fact that, Perplexity, you can really, set out to stump it, and it is more likely to provide an explanation as to why it can't answer your question than it is to hallucinate, which I really like.
Despite me digging my boots into Google, because I'm annoyed at them over how they're changing the pricing for Google Workspace, there's a blog on our website you can look at, and we might talk about it in a future episode. I did also do a similar test on Gemini, which is Google's AI tool, and it came back with a general story that was better than a Google search. And it said, unfortunately, there isn't readily available data to pinpoint the exact percentage of Australians who've competed in state championships. Here's why. And it talks about Australia having 4 mainstream sports. Participation levels vary and state championship levels are all different. However, some insights: there's high grassroots participation, and the state championship funnel is different for different groups. And it said, given these factors, it's likely the percentage of Australians who have competed in state championships for mainstream sports is in the single digits, possibly around 5% or less. This is just an educated guess, and more research on participation rates at different levels for each sport would be needed for a more accurate figure. Again, I think that's a smarter response than just a Google search. Not quite the same flourish as Perplexity AI, but not that far behind.
But I think that's probably the key difference, is that Gemini is trying to give someone a decent answer who isn't an ex-academic researcher. Perplexity really is trying to have the credibility of someone with a lot of research experience, can trust that if they get material, it's going to be credible, and if it can't provide credible material, it will provide a good justification. So Perplexity really is a bit more of a niche product that, if you use it well, can do lots of things, but it's probably not as easy to use as Gemini. But Gemini is doing a pretty good job.
It is, because I then said, what about the sport of kayaking? And it said it's a popular sport, but reaching state championships less common because it's an individual sport and blah, blah, blah. And it then said, I like this bit, considering these factors, the percentage of Australians who competed in state kayaking championships is likely much lower than 5%, possibly in the range well under 1%. Again, but I like this. However, this doesn't diminish the popularity of recreational kayaking in Australia. Many Australians enjoy kayaking for leisure and fitness. So, again, it's like a mini librarian in the pocket. The final thought, what does this mean for businesses who've built themselves up? And Kelly Noble from Glam Adelaide mentioned this in a public Facebook post about lamenting that this undoes her business model if she relies on being the holder of this information so that Google search sends people to her site. What do we throw our arms up if we are Kelly, or is making her site one of the ones that is cited and hoping that people go to look at the citation links is the way forward? I note, of course, Gemini did not give citation links, whereas Perplexity AI did.
I think, from Kelly's perspective, it's doubling down on the human aspect of everything she does, accepting that general information gets you interested, but then you want to know what something's like from a human perspective. Like, the AI can't tell you if it's fun. The AI can't tell you if it's quirky. These words, have very much social and cultural contextualized meaning that AIs just aren't going to get for a while, if ever. And more and more, we're going to want the rough or core information, the technical side of things, very quickly from the AI. But then we want to know, is it actually appealing at a human level? And for that, we've saved so much time on the basic research. Then checking in with something a person's written is a really nice way to counterbalance and go, well, do I like the feel of it? Do I like the way it sounds?
Yes, that might be the answer, but is it going to make life feel plastic or whatever? That's what a human can bring to the table.
Yeah, and it's about doubling down on the human and not just doing the generic things, because the generic things will be done by an AI agent. And we'll all get very good at finding the generic things with an AI agent in under a few seconds, which will give us 2 minutes to find out something human about the topic if we're really interested.
On that note, I'll just mention I did ask Perplexity AI about Steve Davis, a marketer from Adelaide. It brought up a lot of stuff about me that I had totally forgotten, including quotes of things I'd said in the past. So it's going to be our collective memory, and it could either be convenient or inconvenient depending on what it surfaces.
Our 4 Ps. Number 3, problems. I asked the question for the best reason possible. Simple curiosity. Oscar Wilde.
In the problem segment, just a quick one, a reminder to set up 2-factor authentication with anything relating to your website or emails that does not rely on a code being sent to your email. Case in point, I was talking to a client the other day who had their 2-factor authentication code. So they go to log into their web host, and to just double check that, yes, you've put the username, yes, you put your password, I want to make sure it's you, it sends a little code, and that code was being sent to their email address. The problem was they'd forgotten to renew their email, their domain name, and so emails were broken. And so this is just a reminder to choose either, if it's offered, an SMS option so that a site you log into can send a code to your mobile phone. That's one way. I still think that's a little bit dangerous in case you change your number, or if it's at a workplace and a staff member you had it connected to leaves, especially if they leave under unhappy circumstances. Good luck getting those codes. And the other option is using apps like the Google Authenticator app, where the service that's setting this up will give you a QR code which you flash, and it connects your Authenticator app to that site, so that when it's time to log in, you open it up and you say, here's the Talked About Marketing app, and the current code is 384982. Plug it in. It doesn't matter if your email's working or not. You will have access. So just a quickie today in the problem segment to make sure you do it today, tonight, immediately. Two-factor authentication, not relying on emails.
Our 4 Ps. Number 4. Perspicacity. The one duty we owe to history is to rewrite it. Oscar Wilde.
Finally, David, let's kick off this episode, or no, the opposite of kicking off, lay down this episode with a little bit of fun that takes us back to the beginning when we were talking about making conversations, because Mr. Duhigg uses a great example from the screenwriters of the TV sitcom Big Bang Theory. And it actually shows one other thing about communicating that we didn't get to at the top of the program, and that is for me to feel like I'm bonding with you, for me to feel like there's a connection here. It's not even what we say. It's not even if we try to nod or maintain eye contact. What we're listening for and can tell is the emotional tone that you're using matching mine, and is the energy level of your communication matching? That's an important input too, isn't it, David?
Massively. And it's something I'd probably realized most of my life being blind. It's so important. And I'd learned to mirror with tone and energy without knowing why it worked. I just knew it worked, so I did it. So having Charles Duhigg bring up the example of the first episode of Big Bang Theory, and remembering why, the first few minutes of it are amazing, and you already know that the series is going to be excellent. It was like, oh, wow, another one of those moments where suddenly something becomes clear, and you can explain to other people why it works, rather than just shrugging and going, well, I know it works, but I don't know what it is.
And just realize that, of course, in your situation, you're hearing this more than even the rest of us. So you probably have noted times that people have not really been all that engaged. My goodness.
Well, more often than not, what I say to people is I don't really mind what words people say. I'm looking for whether the tone and energy fits the conversation.
Yeah.
If their tone and energy fits the conversation, then their words, well, they probably mean some of them. But if their tone and energy don't match, then, well, whatever that's coming out of their mouth is not really what they want to say. It's not really the conversation they want to be a part of.
They did the pilot of Big Bang Theory, and it fizzed because these characters are bad at communicating, but you still had to capture this. And when they had a chance to reshoot the pilot, they were able to get the actors matching each other's tone.
New neighbor?
Evidently.
Significant improvement over the old neighbor.
200-pound transvestite with a skin condition? Yes, she is.
Oh, hi.
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 Hi?
We live together, but in separate heterosexual bedrooms.
Oh, okay, well, guess I'm your new neighbor. Penny.
Oh, Leonard, Sheldon.
Hi.
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 No, we're going to start season 2 of Battlestar Galactica.
I'm gonna invite her over. Hi. Again.
Hi.
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 So the question, this being perspicacity, David, is yes, that was all very successful. Big Bang Theory got off the ground, became one of the most popular sitcoms ever. That thing of having Sheldon, someone who academically has a reason he's chosen things and communicates that bluntly with people, not nastily, but just matter-of-factly and bluntly, could that work 10 or 20 years later? And I think we discovered that with Young Sheldon, which is a TV series that our family has loved, more so than Big Bang Theory, I think the answer is yes. Here's a taster of Young Sheldon applying the same formula.
Hello?
Can I be your lab assistant?
What time is it?
That's not a no.
If I say yes, will you please stop hounding me?
Absolutely.
Fine. You win. Good night.
Just out of scientific curiosity, were you persuaded by the disorienting nature of this late-night phone call, or by the cumulative weight of my relentlessness?
That one.
I learned an important lesson that night. When you want something, relentlessly annoying is your road to victory.
So is that probably the simplest secret to take away, David, is pay attention to the tone, the emotional tone, and the energy that you're bringing to a conversation to give you a greater chance of bonding with people?
I really think if people can try and match tone and energy, and then remember to try and work out, are we having a conversation about help, a hug, or being heard? If you can do those two things, you're going to have better conversations with most people most of the time.
Yeah, well, I suppose.
And he's just derailed this conversation in just the way he wanted to by totally changing the tone and the energy.
Thank you for listening to Talking About Marketing. If you enjoyed it, please leave a rating or a review in your favourite podcast app. And if you found it helpful, please share it with others. Steve and David always welcome your comments and questions, so send them to podcast@talkedaboutmarketing.com. And finally, the last word to Oscar Wilde. There's only one thing worse than being talked about, and that's not being talked about.